那他的老师是其中一位普利兹克奖的得主。那他在他的 Studio 完成了1年的设计课之后，他他的太太当时还是他的女朋友，就是 Armida。那 Armida 她是工业设计师，那他们俩一起合作展开了他们的事务所。那他们最早的前几个案子是一个发廊的室内装修案。那很厉害的是，他们在大概23、24岁的时候，他们就接到了一个教堂的案子，所以他们就在那个时间点就完成了他们第一个建筑的案子。那个案子非常非常的美，大家可以到他们的事务所网站，那 ArtGallery 上面都可以看到这个教堂的案子。那接下来他们两位一起到了Harvard GSD，那跟我是同班同学。那路易斯真的非常厉害，因为他在墨西哥，他申请到 GSD 的时候，他是他们学校有史以来第一个申请到哈佛的学生，所以当时他们学校给了他全额的奖学金到哈佛念书。那同时他到了哈佛之后呢，他又拿了哈佛的奖学金，所以我们都会常常笑他说他在哈佛念书的时候都在赚钱这样子。然后因为每个人都那学费很贵啊，但他都是有2倍的资金在研读他的研究所。那之后，他们在美国的期间，他们也接受到很多的委托案，在学校的期间，那他们两位因为同时都在美国的关系，所以他们长达2年的时间是远距离的在经营他们的事务所。那这件事情真的非常非常的惊人，因为他们执行案件都非常非常大，那他们就会在周末的时候飞到美国的其他地方，或是飞回墨西哥去监造、去施工、去开。然后，那他们最近呢完成了一个非常非常大、那非常非常漂亮的一个 resort 的一个案子，在墨西哥的一个海边。那等一下他们也会提到，那这个案子也得到了 Design 今年度的一个最佳设计的一个奖项。那我们也恭喜，就是 Armida 她在去年她有来到交大，那实体的跟大家碰面。那今年呢，她已经成为了妈妈，她在明年的2月生下他们这样子。那我就不再多说废话，就是非常欢迎大家，等下是可以打断他们，然后举手，他们都很乐意跟大家分享这样子。那我们现在就欢迎他们两位，Let's welcome Luis and Armida.
Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Victor. Thank you very much, Professor Howe. It's very nice to see you again. And hi to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again sharing our work at NYCU, Graduate Institute of Architecture. As Professor said, we were here like a year and a half ago, and really it was beautiful to know all the people in the school and be around your beautiful country. It was really amazing, and the experience, like the welcoming attitude of all the Taiwanese people all the time. Well, let me start sharing the presentation. Professor, I think maybe the sharing should be enabled. I believe so, because it won't. Okay, perfect. Yeah, thank you. Great. Okay. Well, our talk tonight is called Space Flows and Temporalities. Tonight for you and in the morning for us. Quite interesting. And I will start just to, I'm just gonna give you a very quick presentation. We really not only wanted to show you our projects and our work, but also just to share an experience that as a young studio, we've been working as an office for 10 years. We still, like, of course, in the architecture field are very young. So we thought it would be nice to share with you, in a way, how did we approach our work since the beginning? And that even though there's been evolutions in the process, in the complexity of the projects, and there's always been a constant in how we approached each of those projects. So from that, then how we discovered and were interested in how can our work influence broader groups of people, and even though projects that could be more beneficial socially into larger groups of users and more complex clients, not just private clients where our projects would influence maybe a family or just a smaller range. So in that chronology, we will start sharing some of the projects, and we will end with one of our final research that we've been doing now for 4 years. As Victor explained, we were together and we met in a fantastic time at the GSD at Harvard in Cambridge. And of course, that was an opportunity to expand our perspective in how can we approach much more complex projects, as I was saying. Okay, with no more further explanation, I'm going to start explaining this Agave corporate office. For some reason, we've been working a lot with different companies, not only houses or something like that, but like companies. And in this case, we're from the state of Jalisco in Mexico, where we have a lot of the Mexican culture embedded, and the agave is one of those things that are local that are local to our context. Okay, so we started designing these corporate offices, and thinking that the company works with the fields and the agave fields, we thought that it would be very important that that essence of the fields and the countryside would be transmitted to corporate offices in a corporate building in the city. So coming from there, we incorporated these materials, which are the volcanic stone that you see on the bottom, and we developed together with a good friend of us, coming from vernacular tradition, this dirt finish in the walls, which is composed by hay and agave fibers incorporated. So that's why you can see like this organic material, these little chips of clear material in the walls. So here you can see that something that would look much more generally in an office like a lawyer's office or something that looks like a bank or something like that, we're trying to bring in the culture into this corporate environment. In the office, we always start, Armida and I and our team, working through conceptual illustrations and trying to find the meaning behind every element into the architecture. We were trying to think, how can we blend the nature of more corporate materials like the normal carpet used for offices, the furnishings for offices and all of that it also has its kind of its beauty, but we needed something much more that talked about the culture of the agave. So this is something like basic in terms of like a collage. How can we Armida and I start conceptualizing, trying to put some ideas on the table. As you can see, well, this is like a common building that we could find anywhere in Taiwan, Mexico, or the US. So it was very important to bring the local companies to this global kind of level, but without losing the spirit. This is some of the drawings we initially started making. We were thinking, of course, of making some rampart walls, but then we came with the idea of if in the natural endemic buildings in Mexico, we have this material called pajarcilla. It would be nicer to include like the residual of the agave production into the actual walls that look much more like that. So these are some images of the final result of the project. As you can see, we were working a lot with we always try to work with very few materials and also trying to work with a chromatic palette that blends one into each other. Like the carpet is not very different into its, let's say, into its color and into its texture, into other more organic materials. We always think that lately as we start working more and more and learning from previous projects where we were not very aware, or how can I say, we didn't have like the capacity maybe to work with the light. In this case, we started to understand much better how, for example, matte color like these walls gives you a different sense of light into the spaces. So there's a lot of these chiaroscuro, like let's say the Caravaggio paintings, where you have a point in the space where it's very light, very clear in terms of the light, and other spaces that are darker. So this was very beautiful because in the main meeting room, like this space, we could manage to have like a darker space because there's projections and so on, and then clearer spaces like there on the photo on the back where it's like the main workspaces and so on. We always try to work with very organized lines. It's just the way we've always worked, trying to follow straight lines. And as I mentioned, working with the light. Here you can see the combination between, let's say, like a corporate chairs and seating, and then like the main table of this meeting room, which is actually designed by us, and we include a volcanic stone in the middle and all of the base. So it's this mixture between, let's say, the more industrial and then the most organic and handmade, which is pretty much the essence also of agave companies, which are well known for tequila and agave syrup. Also, we had these interventions made out of green natural walls. And it's something that just helps in the environment, of course, of a better quality of the air and a better atmosphere, and also giving like some sound isolation from specific spaces that need it. So here you can see something like that. As I said, it's on the 21st floor in the corporate area of Guadalajara, our city. And here you can see like all the floors made out of volcanic stone, something that we have in Mexico a lot, that we as architects value and enjoy a lot, is working with local artisans, because still there's a lot of handcraft. For example, this floor was like artisanally cut piece by piece because this size of floor doesn't exist in the market. So we can still work in the people in Mexico. That's something that in a lot of countries, maybe it's too expensive or it's too difficult or it's just impossible. In Mexico, it's still very nice to improvise and work with handmade and handcraft. This is like the general workspaces. As you can see, there's offices inside. So we also work something very important in this project thinking, how can we introduce the light from the facade into the most interior spaces to have the most natural quality of light into the core of the building. just thinking that people would be working much better than feeling just in a very artificial environment. You can see the finish of the wall. Something also we do a lot is we don't like, not that we don't like, but we don't try to make people understand everything since the beginning. So it's something our projects always try to let you experience the spaces, and then as the farther you go in, you start maybe realizing maybe the texture of the wall or other things in the space, but it's not something that is talking too loud since the beginning. It's something to discover, and maybe several times you visit, you start realizing what's going on. Okay, something also, as I was mentioning, is that the work of the office has been very diverse. So this is a photo that is.
So we start this hotel around 2017. And when the client asked us for this project, we were kind of writing and doing some questions about how we are gonna really intervene the site in the way that we can be really as much responsible as possible. Because like the site, as you can see here, it's in a way very virgin, and it has it's full around huertos. So we wrote something that I will start reading about it. So we thought about on how my desert tourism fostered a sustainable development of a territory to champion environmental health and the well-being of local communities. In a region where the corrosion of culture and tradition is being accelerated by rapid development. El Perdido embraces Baja California Sur historical roots and material culture, providing a glimpse to the past while suggesting a potential design language for the future. In order to dissipate established hierarchies, traditional building techniques have been embraced in novel applications and recast to foster new behaviors. So El Perdido is located 800 meters from the Pacific Ocean. So here you can see the ocean on top. In the small agriculture town, and it's called El Pescadero, which is a rich plantation around with basil, chili, tomatoes, and strawberries. The unique ecoregion is defined by an expansive low suburb that drifts across the coastal alluvial plains, west wind into the foothills of the Sierra de la Laguna mountains, which are the ones that you can see part there and part in the east. We did a climatic analysis, and the design responds to the atmospheric conditions of its geography, and great care was taken to provide guests with optimal thermal comfort during their stay. Temperature, precipitation, humidity, wind, and solar incidents on the site were taken into consideration to employ strategies of passive cooling during the summer and passive heating in the winter. Here are the Sierra de la Lagunas that we meet. So here is the east, and in the Pacific Ocean, we have the west. So we were doing a research around and trying to read what we have with historical roots around, and we realized that it was the best way to respond to this project is through this analysis we did, context, and the vernacular materiality, which allows the visitor to connect with the local way of life in Pescadero, where the endemic vegetation, earthen walls, wooden structure, and palm roofs epitomizes Baja California's Sur heritage. This palette, typically disgregated in contemporary developments for imported materials and tropical vegetation, is defined exclusively by local sourced materials and built by local craftsmen, resisting convention. So the architectural experience is imbued with a distinct terroir of the region, while the reinvigorating an appreciation for local construction. I will just give you a little bit of context. So El Pescadero, this site, it's 1 hour from Los Cabos. And Los Cabos, it's a region where it's highly developed. It can be a beach like Cancun in the south of Mexico. Los Cabos is another city that is developed, and it's really, really kind of full of these developments that we are talking about that are in a way more commercial. So in a way, we were kind of really pushing back and forth on how we can do the things in a more conscious way. This was one of the things that were really that we thought about it. So the place is this one. We can see the master plan, and we have here the main entrance. So the guests arriving at the main entrance are welcomed by a formal group of palo blanco trees that provide shade during the approach to the central house, the guest house, composed of a living area, dining room, kitchen bar for visitors, multi-purpose area stored with local products, and reception. The central house serves as a social nucleus and central spoke to the entire property. To the north of the house is a restaurant and a bar resting with a deep canyon of locally collected boulders. To the south, a sunken courtyard delimited by a low earthen walls host a quiet fountain, and east facing a chapel. Extending west from the chapel is a linear walk around by endemic vegetation that takes guests to an overlook with panoramic views of the Pacific Ocean. Each walk and each destination is specifically calibrated to connect guests to the regional context in which El Perdido is located. The interior garden has a narrow pool directly connected to the central house and a collection of villas where guests live during their stay. Each villa is designed to promote both intimate and social life, created by a bedroom, a bathroom, living area, dining room, kitchen, and terrace. The buildings are configured to maximize efficiency while ensuring a contrast dialogue between the interior space and the surrounding landscape. The result is a permeable building where the limits between the interior and the outdoor vanish, where walls made of earth and palo de arco merge with the torotes and the yuccas beyond. So basically, talking about the private and the public, something it was important as a strategy is that all these villas in this part in the front are the public areas. And then we mirrored these villas with these ones, so we can have all these private gardens around. So even though the site is not so big in terms of square meters, it's really nice because at the end, that right now it's already open, the guests have this sensation of privacy, even though you can see that the villas in a way are a little bit close together. So they still have this privacy we needed at the beginning. And at the same time, they have this duality to really have these public spaces and make community. So talking about the villa, we were trying to understand these climatic conditions. How can it's really warm mostly all of the months, so we try to really understand wind ventilation and try to provoke it a little bit more. So through these two volumes, we have here the bedroom, we have the living room, and having separate these two volumes, this make it really nice path where the wind can come through, and all the villas are put in this orientation so we can provoke this wind current. So another thing that we were realizing as well is how can, since the climate is really, really comfortable most of the year, it will be how it was going to be good to really open the spaces and be in between interior and exterior. So here we can see how having instead of one door into the villa and then getting entrance and outside from the same door, even the client was, well, we have like 10 doors in the villa. So in a way, it was very interesting because here the guest can open all these different doors, and then the villa feels much more permeable, and the guests don't feel that like it's like a two-room villa. It feels he's much more in the outside. Talking about structural criteria, we put up the villa 1 meter up, and then the foundation is made of concrete, and then we have a concrete slab, and then we have load-bearing walls made of rammed earth. So the rammed earth walls are having the weight, and then they come the wood structure on top. Here we can see how we were putting it, and then it was covered with palm roof. Here we see some details about it, how the wood was put into the rammed earth walls, a palm that it's really vernacular, and these are the palo blancos that I was mentioned before. So sorry, the para de arcos. So these para de arcos are really traditional in the area. People have been using them for years, decades, and Luis and I and me we're traveling a lot to understand really all these vernacular techniques into different where they applied it in different ways, and we try to really read as better as possible to really respond to the site. So as the last project we present, the material has a big character and role in each project. In this case here, we can see the void between the two volumes that we have the one villa, the other one, and the other one. So it's really nice how you really feel the breeze and some of the wind that we are kind of provoking, because in a way we don't have so much. In the interior, we can see an example of how there's a door, but then there is a window in front of the bed, and then we have the bathroom on one side, and how the light gets in from the east and then from the west. So it's pretty nice in the morning how you feel the light. Through the landscape, which we did it with a good friend as well, which is Fletch, we really embedded kind of like the vernacular vegetation with this architectural narrative. We put this photo to understand that we have these two villas that in a way they are a little bit close together, but at the end they have this privacy. Talking about the guest house, we have here the bar. We have here some services. Back are all the back services of the hotel. And in here are like the bar kitchen, where it's like the common area, and a living room. And all this is a patio where it's connected with a pergola, and this patio that is a little bit sunken. You will see a little bit some photos now. But what we do a lot in our process that we really want to share with you is how our process design is not linear, it's very circular. So in a way, we do a plan, then we do a section, and we even have the model, and then we go back and we question ourselves if it's the correct way or not. And so we go around and around. Here we were doing some sections before designing it on how it will work. And here we have the Palo Blanco groove and how we go down and how we go up again to the deck pool and then the pool. So how we can really make this transition as much as fluent as possible, where we can really have the outside and then the interior merge. So here we have very few doors. So here sometimes we have open areas because obviously our climate permits. So talking about our design process, once we were designing and modeling, here is one of the process we did that is kind of like checking if our model and our formal way of doing the things was correct, and to really confirm again temperature, light, wind. Here we even have like a light study that we were understanding what was into the service area, what was into the main area, analyzing shadows or the orientation. At the beginning, we were proposing this, then we were analyzing that it was much better to really open up the roof so we can have this wind current. So then it's kind of very circular. So we go there and then we try to never be sure about what we are doing. So then they come some questions that make better, make better the project. Here is the guest house where you can see how it goes down and then you can go up. And one of the things that we really try to do is to really work with the teams involved in the project. So we have the interiors team, the landscape, us, and how we cannot really realize when does one work ends and when does the other one start. So it was pretty important for us to really have a lot of conversations, a lot of ping pong presentations. So you can see here, here is like a really important path, concrete path that goes all around the place, the hotel in the whole project, and how it's, even though it's out, it merged and get inside, and how through strategies like we have here gravel outside, we as well have gravel inside. So we start really trying to really make one narrative. Here we see the path.
As being a hotel, we were also asked to design specific amenities to the project, and those amenities became, of course, by being close to the ocean, to the Pacific Ocean, as Armida was saying. In Mexico, people are very used to having a very direct relationship to the ocean when they go to the beach. In this case, the Pacific Ocean is very, very harsh. So also the experience in the area is not just about the ocean, but also about the orchards in the area, the agriculture, and the contrast of the ocean and the orchards with the desert vegetation. So we realized that still the idea of the water was in the people's mind. So that's why we came up with the idea of having an overlook. By being a hotel and having a certain freedom of narrative, we decided, for some reason, working with the concept, to design this object, I would say. And so it's pretty much a wooden structure that you can walk to the top. It's still made of these very organic materials, the palapa roof, which is the palm, and the same timber as the villas. So in this way, people can go up and have a different experience. On the bottom, there's like a hot pool. So pretty much, this is a much more playful experience as part of the amenities that a small hotel like this one could have. You can see the ocean there on the back, and then the mountains again, which is part of the experience of the space. We're always very conscious or very aware of making the people's experience very aware of their actual context and where are they standing and located independently from what we can propose as architects. This is something that you can see during the night. The sunsets here are truly stunning. So we try to do, we say, this very low-tech object that can just have a playful experience with people. This is how this looks from the surroundings and the neighboring properties. Something that when we start working, sometimes there's things that you don't realize or you're not aware. Like, for example, here after we finished this thing, we started to relate how, for example, the lines, the structure, and all of that, in a way, talks and relate very nicely to the local landscape. The other part of the amenities is this spiritual space. There's something that happens in the area, which is mainly internationals coming into the area because it's like very beautiful, the desert and so on. They come in with their friends, their families, and they have like religious ceremony, weddings mainly. So it's something that we were required to have as part of the program. So thinking about the local missions from the colonization period and all of that, which have very nice architectural spaces, we thought that thinking about this patio and this small religious space that could open up to the project would be very interesting. This is the space we had, like the date palms related to this like desert landscape and the spiritual feeling of this architecture. And as you can see, we still have the vara de arco, which is these permeable windows. This sticks from a local shrub. And the same materials, but just interpreted in a different kind of space. This project, well, it's a project that we pretty much gave us a lot of lessons because we were kind of younger when we designed it. But again, 2 years later, we were commissioned by a tequila company called Centinela to design this spiritual and social space inside the factory. It is located in the northeast of Jalisco, our state, which is known, as I mentioned before, to be one of the most first religious and with the most outstanding Mexican contemporary culture. This is an image of an hacienda, which is, let's say, the local ancient houses that used to work with the agriculture and the people of the area. So the spiritual and social space is our interpretation of the mixed-use spaces that exist in these older hacienda buildings and other houses of the region of the 18th and 19th century, where people used to have a chapel or oratory in their own houses adjacent to the terraces and other open covered spaces, like in this case, a corridor in a house where social and family events were commonly held. And then these spaces were separated or made into a single space depending on the occasion and the area needed for the religious ceremony. These spaces sometimes are as flexible as to allow to triple their capacity into other spaces. And it is by using local natural materials, brick, like the photo we showed before, pink sandstone, and the terracotta tiles, which are local and not inexpensive materials, that we create a link between the people, the building, and its surroundings. As you can see, this relates a lot to the previous projects. Like, that's why we were interested in this project. We had showed it before, but we were, as we said, not as interested in the specific project, but much more into sharing how from corporate offices to a hotel or to a different kind of building, always reading the context independently, if it's a 21st floor in a financial area or a more rural area, we can work with the architecture and the narrative of a project. The chapel sits on a cantilevered platform overviewing the lake, the gardens, the factory, and the Gabe field. The architecture, according to Jose Ortega y Gasset, the Spanish writer, breaking the continuity with the past is a lowering of man and a plagiarism of the orangutan. The adobe brick works as a thermic material, similar to rammed earth, and works as a passive cooling in summer and passive heating in winter. This is pretty much uncooked brick. Due to its thermal landscape and social relationships with the region, this fulfills a function of link with the environment. The tectonics of the building responds to a need for meeting the properties of the adobe and the spatial needs to cover the program, creating long spans to achieve continuity between spaces and the landscape. The chapel sits on a cantilevered platform overviewing the lake and the gardens, as I said, the factory, and the agave fields. The building is oriented in a way that it's close to the fierce southern and western sun, keeping privacy and from the traffic patio of the factory and much more loud areas. There's also a terracotta tile pathway leading visitors from the factory towards the chapel, allowing them to admire the scenery and enjoy the walk around the lake and gardens, leading them finally into this complex. The low height of its main entrance opening underlines the feeling of intimacy and sanctity. This tall dominating volume shelters the visitor and frames the sky with its solid and strong presence, allowing light to cast strong and defined shadows into its interior, emphasizing a spiritual experience. The open space between volumes merges with the bucolic landscape, and the covered space frames essential views. It is with the changeable location of the cross. In this case, this is a Catholic, and the opening and closing of doors that we managed to modify the spaces into two main options, depending on the size of the space required, either for a religious or for a hybrid in nature event, which would be both religious and social. We intended to create a sensory interaction between spaces, dissolving the edges between interior and exterior, protected and connected to nature.
The chapel is made from cultured collage. Tradition and utopia, a contrast that Colin Rowe and Fred Cotter developed, where they proposed collage as a method. It's really important that collage in our process, as we mentioned before, and as we have been doing our process, we really want to understand collage as a method and as a culture as well, where we really put even history, tradition, materials, and put all together and understand how we can really understand the context to do this narrative or even interpret it. So so this collage as a method, they have a theory where they mention that it's not to be neither in one side or the other, but a balance between both. Utopia, in which one has ceaselessly completely to believe, and a tradition from which one is critically detached. How can we believe in both? Colin Rowe suggests that a collage approach, an approach in which objects are conscripted or seduced from out of their context, is at the present day the only way of dealing with the ultimate problems of either both utopia and tradition, and the provenance of the architectural objects introduced into the social collage, and not to be of great consequence. It relates to taste and conviction. So this part that Colin Rowe and Fred Cotter wrote, we in a way, we understand ourselves pretty much with this text, because it's in a way very important for us to understand part of all these different things, culture, tradition, material, as I mentioned before. And as well, something important that they mention as well is how we can really put things and probably try to make them out of their context, but it really doesn't mean that completely. But a good example can be like how we really put the earth walls into a commercial corporate office that is in the 21st floor. You know, how can they usually never put earth, and we even put in this mixture, you know, many different things that usually you put in a rural area. So how can you really from one thing put it into the other, but at the same time really connected with all these different things? So how can sometimes we question ourselves, how can our design process go far beyond being a collage as a method and probably design through a collage as a culture, where the collage is made beyond architectural analogous examples. The Centinela Chapel conceptual process went through culture collage by having historical sense, understanding the culture of place, tradition, beliefs, material culture, techniques, and function. So then T.C. Eliot mentioned something that is as well really powerful that we believe, and that is the historical sense, which is a sense of the timeless, as well as of the temporal, and of the timeless and temporal together is what makes a writer traditional. And it is at the same time what makes a writer most accurately conscious of his place in time, of his own contemporaneity, where the origin starts at looking and understanding history. So if we speak in Louis Kahn language, because Louis Kahn usually have written a lot of some of the text where he emphasizes that understanding, for example, the form. So form, he mentions it as a concept. Right now, in today's era, we say that our concept, it was for Louis Kahn, its form. So how can the concept in this case was the haciendas? We really saw these historical typologies in the haciendas. And then think the what and the design as a how. So yeah, that the haciendas are there and how we are going to really, in a way, reinterpret it and understand their function, their technique, and their cultural tradition. So it was kind of like a re-origination through an abstraction of the origins form. So from the haciendas, right? We abstract the function from the origin and reinterpret it to a present-day function, form, material, and technique. We understand it as an exploration and a recycle of meaning. And this part supports what Octavio Paz was a Mexican writer, really important from the 20th century, and he wrote, the characteristic feature of modernity is criticism. What is new is set over and against what is old. And it is this constant contrast that constitutes the continuity of tradition. So it's really nice because then sometimes we confused in what is tradition, but always tradition is present in our days, and it's like a connection between the past and the present. So kind of well, that'd be so. In the tequila process comes the baggage, which is a receipt from the juice extraction of the agave fiber, what is used together with the soils of the region for the production of the adobe brick as a fiber to join the clay in order to avoid the adobe crack. So it was similar of what Luis explained before on the earth walls from the corporate office, that we put some of the agave residues into the mixture. In this case, the brick in the region has this agave fiber. So this adobe brick has this agave fiber that comes from the production of the tequila process. So used together with the soils of the region for the production of the product brick. Being located inside a tequila factory for the baggage fulfills an important cycle. So this is kind of recycling. So after after 6 years of completion of this project, the project has a positive reaction in different social and cultural aspects, and the building functions as a catalyst between the culture and the landscape, helping to transmit contemporary experience of the region to its visitors.
This is before we enter the part of the research, we wanted to share this project because, as you've seen, again, we've been working with these companies, and this was this tomato producing company in also very close to where we live. And very interestingly, they asked us to design their distribution center in Texas. This is the greenhouses they have here in the countryside. where they have high technology greenhouses for production, where there's, of course, all sorts of things from pollination with bees and all sorts of controlled agricultural production methods. But we were asked to, as I said, design the distribution warehouse in Texas, where the produce is sent via land and then distributed all over the United States and some areas in Asia. This is the inside, just to give you a little bit of context of the company. The produce, of course, there's very interesting things that simple maybe that we realize that they cut the tomatoes as green or as ripe, depending on the distance that these are going to be sent. So when they reach the shops and all of that, they're perfectly or as best to be sold. And so there's all these kind of logistic interesting things. So we wanted to present this because, again, talking about the material and the context, and in a way, again, the collage of all the context of the project and the we had like a limited budget in a sense, and also we understood that sometimes this multi-panel insulated panel that is used for these warehouses and sometimes is seen as something undervalued, very industrial, that people mainly don't like. And mainly sometimes people, when they inside these buildings, there's like the offices and logistics administration areas, but also the main refrigerated warehouses. And sometimes, even though it's part of the same building, they divide it in the way they do the architecture. But we just thought that similarly as we've done with other materials, maybe this is not a natural material, but in a way it has become endemic because it's what we can find around. And we thought, why don't we just try to dignificate this material in this industrial context and make it something that people can experience in an unusual and positive way as they usually do. So we just, by doing this, we just try to do these simple volumes. As you can see, these three main boxes, and between these two boxes, it's the main offices. We thought that an industrial project like this should be mainly about all the people in the company having like a dignity in the space they work in, and also understanding and having some empathy to people, for example, that work in the offices that really don't realize sometimes what people do in the main warehouse. How can we connect these whole relationships of working spaces in the project? So here you can see it's very simple lines in this very flat and sometimes industrial landscape close to the border that mainly talks about, that's why the main topic of our talk today talks about flows, talks about temporality, talks about produce all over the world, how these kind of logistics are crazy in a way, how there's all this movement of products all over the place. And you can see these trucks coming from Mexico, like 800 kilometers away, and then this product being distributed fresh in different countries. You can see this interior space, mainly the offices in these areas being Texas, they're very enclosed and have like a very flat kind of artificial light environment inside. So by creating this little space inside, we start to think of bringing natural light and having a nicer view inside through this very small garden. These windows is kind of the relationships we could manage to have in the project, where pretty much somebody that works exclusively in the more administrative tasks of the office can see through these windows. There are special windows to avoid condensation because, of course, the temperature in the refrigerated rooms is farther much more colder than the offices. but still managing to have like these views inside, and even the truck drivers, everyone in a way gets a view of this small garden. So the project is trying to create like these relationships and empathy through all the processes inside the building. Here you can see it's like the multi-panel, most common and ordinary insulating panel we find everywhere in the world probably, but taken to a level that it becomes like the background, and it's really much more about the quality of the space. Here, as we were saying, we've learned by pretty much the need to work in different typologies of projects, as you've seen. And we've learned to work like in a way into interdisciplinary approach. So pretty much we work with people in this case to design a specific signals and branding according to the specific company. So in a way, we're trying by these signals and so on, by its proportions and its graphic design, to incorporate it into the language of this industrial panel, just to give it a different meaning, and it could be expressed and felt different. And this is the final project before we talk about the research, because we thought it would be nice to share how from working with companies and then starting to work with this tomato producing company, we were asked to design the housing for the workers of the greenhouses. So this is the final part of our talk tonight. It's called Urban Imprint of Migration, which pretty much relates to these workers' housing. Farm worker housing plays an important role in a worker's resilience in the face of adversity. Supporting against or strengthening the disadvantages they confront, architecture plays a crucial role in the processes of both colonization and decolonization, in organizing spatial relationships, expressing ideologies, and serving as evidence for political and cultural claims. Seasonal farm workers and their families are one of the most vulnerable populations in Mexico, according to an important newspaper of the country. In 2016, almost 6.5 million farm workers and family members leave their homes to work into industrial agricultural companies due to insufficient labor opportunities in the place of origin, and focusing in surviving in a bitter way, searching for new opportunities and developing identities. They work and live in precarious conditions with low-paying salaries and basic housing and limited access to transportation, having a lack of continuity in their children's education, and unstable family relationships. It is very easy to see how this housing becomes really a camp. Richard Sennett's model between open and closed form, where in one form people can participate and in another way they cannot, invite us to think how this seasonal farm workers housing typology can be more open, more porous, uncontrolled, open-ended, and with multiple functions. More connected to the closest town, less isolated, more as a prototype, less than a type form. To think about it more as an agora, as a synchronous space, but at the same time providing more orientation. It has to issue an invitation to mix rather to impose mixing. This is a little bit of the context. This is the state of Jalisco, which is the state where it's our state in the country. And pretty much this is just a map that shows how pretty much all over the state we can find this housing typology, which is very basic. The next image is pretty much how they look right now. It's extremely basic and sometimes, most of the time, I would say, very decadent. They lack of very basic needs, as we said. but also at the same time, here you can see in the previous image, with the private units, that people, even though the housing is lacks a lot of things, and people always try to identify themselves and try to create a sense of identity by sometimes, as you can see here, creating plants. Sometimes it's by color or small expressions that talk about how, as individuals, it's very important for everyone, for us, for everyone, to have a sense of belonging to place, and always a very strong relationship from the individual and the collective. Yes, this is a part of the, when we were asked to design this housing, of course, we realized, even though we were working with different architectural programs, that we didn't have really the tools as architects generally to start working in a project like this, because this project, due to its social and ecological and architectural and spatial conditions, is farther beyond the tools we had. So we had to do initially, of course, this participatory design workshop, where we can really have some empathy for the people and trying to understand all the phases and complexities of these projects that goes from the company, from the company owners, the agricultural company system at large, and also the people. And also talking about, as we said, that the people is not just like the people. Inside these groups of people, there's people that come from different areas. And even though they have in common that, of course, like everyone, of course, works in a specific field or something, in this case, the agricultural industry, they all have sometimes a different language, even though they come from Mexico, indigenous language, different beliefs and understanding. So in a way, as we said, we needed to make this participatory design workshop, plus other methodologies of drawing and understanding differently, to luckily do the best we could. So this thing is, and project is so complex that, of course, we needed to work it out by organizing it in 4 main scales. So it came from understanding the production, which was like the greenhouses, the packaging areas, and how inside the company there's different people that do very different tasks. Then the urban context, which relates to the housing areas, which are called albergues, and of course the immediate urban contexts of those. And then inside the housing, going like into smaller scales, the collective spaces with which people share, sports, recreational, housing, and just spaces to hang out. And the much more domestic spaces that you can see on the right, which is outdoor spaces connected to the living areas that at the same time relate to other collective spaces in the domestic and their houses. So by understanding the language of farm worker human mobility patterns, the aim is to identify needs and factors of this flow, to analyze the different fragments that construct the territory of multiple flows that dominate the itineraries of this population in movement. The agricultural industry in the 1970s started to use worldwide plastic in greenhouses, so they became less expensive, easier to produce and construct. So the production of tomato in this case is one of the most common products in this greenhouse industry. According to Keller Easterling, the greenhouses are the cruises of the tourist world. They have made the agricultural industry into a mobile territory. It is not only a formula for the growth of urbanism, so Eastern of plants, but also for the growth of urbanism, sorry. Easterling talks about how it exists different worlds, some more segregated than others, and how they are shaped by resource and desire. A world is a global cultural current. However, rational and logical, it may purport to be a world may be a global fiction. The most earnest attempts at a logical or rational orders may produce the most hyperbolic environments. This is in a way the process, like we believe in drawing and, as we mentioned, collage and representational techniques as a way of discovering, really. So it is by this drawing that the project might emerge. So in this case, as you can see, this is a map of Mexico. So something we wanted to understand how tomato, for example, has different flows from most of the other agricultural industries. So we just started to map, for example, red peppers, agave, corn, raspberries, sugarcane, avocado as the main agricultural industries, to just understand how the flows of agriculture work, and specifically tomato, and of course how the flows of the tomato industry influenced the movement of people, which is temporary, into the housing. So pretty much from having a wide scope of flows to finally have more tools as architects to design this housing complex.
So in this new colonization of photosynthesis, Easterling explains about these tomato military theaters between, for example, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. So they three, in a way, fight and compete and negotiate between the prices and the economy. And then in the other side, we have as well Spain, Morocco, and Canary Island that have a really similar relationship. So in a way, and as well, probably as well over there, there must be 2-3 different countries that as well have this negotiation in Taiwan as well. So we really were thinking on how this is like a global issue where we really need to even first understand it. So how they really like compete, lowering the price of tomato or other products between each country and another, and how the whole world is really both exporting and importing more agricultural products, creating these hyperbolic environments all over the world. So the agriculture industry in Mexico is really high. There's almost 9 million people that really live in these conditions. And here we can see some of the states that travel, that people live and travel from the south of Mexico to the center or even north. In this valley section, we did this trip. We drive through this area that is in Jalisco. And in this valley section, you can see how the different camps in the region, the population of the camps ranges between 300 and 1,500 people, even more, like 2,000. So this typology usually has basic or non-services that we already explained. And in a way, they live for very temporal, like they live there for 4 months, they go back for 2 months, they return for 4 months. So is this constant migration that they start living like that for 10 years. So according to Easterling, the requirements of high-tech agricultural industry territories are location, loss, loyalty of nations, geologic conditions, atmospheric conditions, climatic conditions, and cheap labor, which many times produces immigrant labor, which is what is happening right now. So as a result, there's a formation index that is created, resulting in climate change, global wages, scales, transportation, and labor migration patterns. So it's really important to understand this index in order to really try, us as designers and architects, to really try to modify them in a positive way. Here we just did some cycles of different products to understand how this migration depends on the way the product is being produced and grown. So here we see how this is the cycle of 1 year and what happens in 1 year. We drew this and how this relates to the migration on how there is more people in specific months and how there is less people in different months and how then this product goes and then it's back. So it's in a way a cycle, and we try to do this, for example, in a sugar cane, then in a raspberry year cycle. So each product in a way obviously is different, but in a way has this flow and constant temporality between the people, right? So the green pepper cycle, the corn. So here we see all these different the avocado year cycle, the agave yearly, which is much more longer and slow. So those drawings helped us to understand this constant flow and this constant movement and temporality. What then later we did is to understand how that typology, the current typology, where you can see, we draw here how this is the domestic part, where Luis explained that we're gonna divide it in 3 or 4. So in this case, we have, for example, the domestic and the collective at the same time, because here's where they wash their clothes and all this. So it's kind of public, but at the same time private. Then we have this that is very domestic, which is their rooms, only their rooms. And then in another part, they have, for example, the kitchen that is very commune, as well as other collective areas where you have probably the soccer field, etc. So here we were trying to understand the current domestic space, so and the activity flows throughout the day. So how it's in the morning, how it's between 7 and 6, and how it's in the night, where really we can understand the movement and the flow. Here in the case as well, but instead of the domestic part, the activity that is in the collective space as well during the morning, during the midday, where you can see the children that go into school inside. Here's the school, for example, a primary school and kinder, and then how during the end of the day they go out and play and be with their parents that return to work. As well here, this current domestic collective space, what happens during the day, during the midday, and at the end. So kind of really understanding how they really use the spaces.
At the end, we were trying to design not only a specific project in a specific site, but as we said, this is a system that happens in the country and of course in other countries in the world. So we were mainly trying to design with this research and representational project a toolbox that could enable us to work in different projects from this typology independently from their location. So what is the antidote to cut the cycle? How can we empower the migrant farm worker? How can we offer them flows that they can control? Participation is about finding a new balance between existing power structures. In order to understand their needs, methodologies such as archival work, studio work, and different field immersion methodologies such as PAR, participatory action research, focus groups, semi-structured interviews, mapping, and analytic quantitative methods are necessary. The aim is to help decrease seasonal farm workers and their families' vulnerabilities by addressing their needs as a result of the previously mentioned methodologies. Agriculture companies are in constant transformation. How can this typology be seen as in transformation as well? As Richard Sennett's open system with parts which cannot be substituted from one another, spatial punctuations, urban quote marks, as a balance between necessity and freedom, where people can be more connected to the closest city or town, and have the possibility to own space through family gardens, for example, that can have a palliative effect and produce a sense of belonging, offering them activities for leisure, commercial services, tools to strengthen education, culture, and identity. Through actions like these, social health and ecological benefits would be provided to the community, giving them a sense of belonging, making them own place they can inhabit physically and symbolically. Instead of just being designed as hardware, the layer penetrating settlements in nature is conceived as software. Activities such as local agriculture, education, recreation, and cultural programs guarantee the collective cultivation of the field. As a prototypical device, the structure only becomes active as soon as we anticipate and co-design the performance needed to produce local identities and culture. So this is pretty much the drawings are like individual parts that we designed, as we said, as part of this toolbox, just trying to understand how, still being basics, we can start to include, let's say, some parts, new parts to the program. As we mentioned, for example, this specific example, learning from successful community gardens and family gardens worldwide, where you can see that talking about the belonging of the people with the site, people can, for example, rent or own for a period of time this plot of land where they can do agriculture for themselves or just ornamental gardens. But also at the same time, the input of the social context is very important. So that's why also as part of this garden, it would be important that other social actors like a university, for example, could also own a plot in this community garden. So there can be like this cross-pollination of knowledge from the local and ancient knowledge of people that they have been working with agriculture for centuries, and the most probably scientific and technical knowledge from the university. So pretty much is this important piece in the project that becomes like a collaboration and a softening between the social tissue. There's this other proposed domestic spaces, like these outdoor spaces outside their housing units, where people can have their individual eating areas, because most of the landscapes and the regions where these agricultural industries are located are good climate, so there's a lot of outdoor living. So just by sharing, let's say, food outside where they can have their individual tables and spaces, but at the same time, in a few meters, there's other people that are doing similar activities. So it is very important that we highlighted in the project the individual and the collective into a much more, as we were mentioning, something that allows for much more freedom of activities into the space.
And as well, so we did these drawings that in a way represent these different activities between the domestic and the collective, or in this case, the domestic and the collective at the same time, and how it works during the day, because obviously they have these different itineraries that it was important to understand the overlap. So in a way, how this, after all this research, navigating between reading, thinking, writing, and representing, we came up with more questions. Like, how can we design a master program rather than a master plan? Farming it, that reacts to time and adaptation, a community that shares geographic space, understands space as an ongoing motion, shares similar rhythms, feelings, and reasons to move. So the Ethnoscape, according to Arjun Appadurai, is the landscape of persons who constitute the shifting world in which we live, the human motion. These moving groups can never afford to let their imagination rest too long, even if they wish to. So the question here is like, are we all ethnoscopes? Are we all immigrants? As Dilip Kuna mentions, rather than design, we have to more think as rather than design as a solution, design as an initiation. So how can we offer them a safer and more human way to flow, because they will still be moving in this invisible crisis? So in a way, we see like if thus a settler is to a city, as migrant is to a flow. So how can we really understand a flow as space and constant movement for migration instead of the city with a settler? And addressing all these relationships between the farm laborers and the living space, the landscape and the land, we thought we could become a major agent of social and spatial transformation towards seasonal farm workers' resilience. So here we see how we have this drawing that has these different scales currently, and how through small movements and interventions, we can really make more community and more behaving their way of life. So the good thing about this is that then after all this research, some years after, we had this client that we have been sharing with him all this research, and now we are up to start a project in the area, in the region, where it is as well intervening one of the farm workers' housing. So we are really enthusiastic about it.
Yes, like we're in a conceptual moment of the design. We don't have a finished design, so we're not gonna go very deep really into the result. We mainly wanted to share how, as we said, coming from, let's say, more typical architectural commissions, sometimes the architectural working path becomes much more open and gives more complexities than are opportunities at the same time, like this case. So finally, after 4 years of research, the first commission came, and it's very interesting how the clients start to change from becoming more private to important agricultural international producers that we're working right now to make this specific housing in this specific site. So it's been very interesting. This is like just some of the conceptual drawings we're working right now, trying to address, but also very importantly, without exceeding the budgets that these companies and systems have for this kind of project. So it's kind of some of the complexities we have to work with. We're in the design process, some design drawings and renderings using with the same budgets other kinds of more local materials, like again something that comes from bricks of the area, maybe uncooked, laminated wood, more techniques that can allow for more efficient production, but at the same time that have more quality in the space. So this is just some of the conceptual design that we have right now. Not, as I said, that we really are going to go too deep into the project because we're in the conceptual phase, but this is some of it. So pretty much that's it from our part. Thank you very much. We hope really that we can leave something here positive for everyone. And I don't know, Professor Hope, if you want to open up the conversation, or there's some points that somebody wants to bring out.
Okay, thank you so much. I guess you can hear me.
Yes, we
Yes,
can.
yes.
Okay, good. Thank you so much for sharing so many projects, and I think that was actually for me personally, I especially like the way how you deal with the vernacular architecture, and also how to mix the living with culture, and also considering about like agriculture, from industrial agriculture to agriculture. I think all these issues that you deal with so fascinating to us. Here I have a few like curiosities regarding your projects. First of all, is about the Tequila's chapel. That is quite like a tradition, turning from traditional like agriculture into like new way of utilization of the space. And also you have the like a tomatoes that in Texas.
Yes.
And yes, and that was actually the very industrial facility that you have to use like modern way of like insulation to deal with all these like storage, all these controlling of all this. It's quite different from all those traditional ways of dealing in like a rural architecture. So in terms of the tectonics and the considerations of you dealing with industrial facility and like using natural material, and the way how you do is quite different. I was wondering the differences when you come consider these kind of projects. I think that's the one first question. The second is regarding the research project you showed in the last project you showed. I was wondering, is it like a real project, or it's it's a studying, been really happening, being implemented?
Right.
You study.
Yeah, so for the
That's
first,
two curiosity, which just maybe I was not but
yeah, for the first question, yeah, definitely you are right, Professor. It's very different, one project from the other, and even the tectonics, the materiality. But in a way, we see each project as each project we really start working on it, we try to think from zero again and start to really understanding their specific context. So in this case, even though it's very different, our design process and our thinking in a way is similar. In what way? In different ways. For example, one way is that since it is an industrial warehouse where there is specific industrial materials that they have to be used because of the refrigeration and the temperature aspects that this warehouse has to have. Usually many people use this multi-panel, this white panel for the roofs and for the walls. And people used to cover it specifically in the area for the offices in that case. So we try to really be as less how can we call it, like putting more materials that we really don't need. So we try to be as natural as possible, even though we were using industrial materials. We realized that it was better just to put the one that it's needed instead of two, that one covers the other one. So in a way, being honest in that way and really trying through then the materials that we really need in each project to really try to use them as simple, but at the same time, it obviously is complex because we have to deal with technique, with forms, function, but how we can really be simple in the way that we really can use the resources as better as possible.
Something, yes, to add to that, yes, of course, the nature of the projects in a way, even though from companies are very different, right? Something I would like to say, we understand context not only as the site or the natural conditions around the site, but also, let's say, the different agents that have any kind of relationship to any project. In this case, as Armida was saying, maybe sometimes the insulated panel becomes the context of the project because that's what we have around us. So we just try to see what's available, and not only in terms of that it's there, but it's also something that we deal with clients in terms of budgets. So we just try to see materials, any material, with eyes of novelty and of ingenuity in a way, because we think that at the end, even though of course we can say there's more beautiful materials than others, we more believe that it's only the way we put things together that makes it better or not. It's just that maybe most of the materials are really beautiful or have some beauty at least in them. So it's just the way we add a meaning to them in a specific project and in relationship to space and experience, that we can find a different meaning for things that we usually see, let's say, as industrial, cheap, cold, or any kind of meaning. We truly believe, or at least we try to differentiate them or give them a different meaning according to the new assemblages we do in every specific project. I don't know if we truly answered the question or the point. And to your next comment about this last research, we showed this last project from the warehouse, the very industrial project, because that's the same client that asked us to do housing for that company. So we're saying that the tomatoes that are stored and distributed to that facility that we designed and built in Texas, the actual workers that work with their hands in the greenhouses, the company provides them with housing, but the housing, not only them, but all the industry, so all the other producers and brands have this typology, but in all of the cases, the housing lacks a lot of things. As we said, to your question, it is a real project. What we were trying to say that is, as architects, with our basic tools that we have as architects, or not basic, but our limited tools, we needed to engage with other kind of processes and thinking, theory, and methodologies during 4 years to just right now start to design this housing in one of the specific sites. So pretty much what we were doing of the project during 4 years is developing a toolbox through drawing techniques and the methods to finally right now, that's where we are right now. We're in the phase of designing the concepts. We're gonna start in the beginning of next year, in a couple of months. We're gonna start building this first actual building coming from all of this background after 4 years.
Great to hear that. So it's like you're looking for a more a methodology or the toolkit, or a more like systematic way to deal with the client you collaborate before, right? I think that's
right. Yes. The idea is that, as we said, it's not like the first project that we showed that we had like a commission, let's say like in a more traditional way, a client as commission with a specific program. In this case, our client in a way started because one client introduced us to this world, but our client at the end, in every housing project we luckily get to do, are 400 persons coming from different environments. And at the same time, if this hopefully we're having like very interesting conversations with, for example, Driscoll's, which is like a worldwide berry production industry, or other big companies. We will get to do more of these housing projects. So at the end, our clients is not one person, it's hundreds of persons, and then thousands of persons that through other methodologies that we developed, as you mentioned, for 4 years, we can get to really benefit from the work of the architecture. Sometimes we realized that before we said, okay, there's a program, there's the materials around it independently, if it's a corporate offices or a hotel, and we said, we really don't believe about expensive or inexpensive materials, as we said, or industrial or vernacular. At the end, space doesn't have a specific budget for good space, or materials also cheaper or more economical materials can be as beautiful as the other ones, more expensive. So we were pushing very hard, how could we take our practice to really benefit larger groups of people and into a more social way, into this other kind of typology where we can influence these other groups.
So our aim was to, since it is a project very complex that took us, and we still probably don't even understand the whole thing, but we really invest our time on really researching and drawing and understanding how this typology works currently, which has been working like that since 1970s. Even in United States, there's even a manual from Cornell and from Columbia that talks about as well from about this typology. And our criticism, once we have been researching on it about this typology, our main criticism is that it really has changed at all between the 70s till now. So there's almost 50 years that has passed through with all these different changes that we have been all having around the world, and this typology has been maintaining the same. So our criticism, by understanding how it works right now and having these clients, we invest our time on understanding and how can we really be a tool to help them live better, and a tool to really make these different albergues or housing, farm workers housing, better in a way that they can really understand it more as a way of living, to really understand their way of the way they have the culture, and to really try to understand this current flow, because they are constantly in motion. So how can they really live better in that place? So that's why we are kind of rethinking and making these different tools. And now, after these years, now the client said, okay, it would be great if we can change or transform, we can say it like a word, like how we can transform this current housing into a better housing where they can live better and work better and understand better the place and the landscape. So
we were of course, the client has been with us throughout the research, so now he understands better. But something interesting here also to put in the table is that the client is not the actual client. Of course, the client is working with us to find the resources and make things happen. But at the end, the client is a group of people that we aim that they can become a community through the project. I don't know if...
Great,
yeah.
Great. So I'm looking forward to this project that it looks like it is aiming to like a community revitalization, or maybe in the future might go forward to like a city-wide or urban scale.
Right.
Yes.
Revitalization that bring in all this notion of looking for like localized solutions, but also have a quite modernized way of dealing with natural materializations. So
Right.
I think that's fantastic. I think I might pass the microphone to student or those participants online. If you have any question or any curiosities about the projects they have, we have a student who can speak Espanol. You give
Great.
it, I just
Where
give
is
you
he
a lot
from?
of pressure.
Oh, he.
Okay.
Actually, I have a question that is, I'm not sure if it's quite simple, but it's really curious. It's like, because what you guys presented in the project El Perdido and the project of the Capilla, like that too, it's like you use a lot of local materials, like the bamboo or the palm leaves on the roof. But what I would like to know is that, uh, is it because that is local material and natural? So you try to put more research on that kind of materials and change it into like windows or doors? Or is that really common in Mexico that you have kind of like commercial market to modularize or to put natural material into like standard product to sell or use? Because for us in Taiwan, it's like the natural material is like we just see it in like local village or a kind of eco village, but it's not really like commercial use. Mostly it's like you put your effort on like research it and you turn it into like furniture or something else. So I would like to ask about that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. In a way, it's something that we have around, for example, I would say in the bigger cities in Mexico, we still see those materials, let's say, for example, adobe brick in the older areas, because that's how, similarly to, for example, Tainan, that you have a lot of historical buildings and you can see the most, all the older techniques. In Mexico, is the same in a way. We have those materials out there. And for example, in the case of the Hotel El Perdido, it's located in a rural, it's countryside area. So to your question, yes, we are really not inventing anything. We're just trying to see what we have around our work and our projects, literally trying to learn from the knowledge in the area about space, comfort, and the use of materials next to the projects. The only thing we do is sometimes we put it together in a different way, but it's available always in the region of the projects, first of all. And something, I mean, outside of an academic environment that it's good to talk about is that by being in Mexico, at least in the region of the projects, it becomes feasible for the projects in economical terms to use. As we said before, we know right now in a lot of parts of the world, mainly in the most developed countries, these natural techniques, especially because the handcraft, the people that works it, becomes impossible to include in projects because it just becomes extremely expensive. So it's not an option. In Mexico, there's still a lot of tradition of handcraft. So that's why, in a way, as I said, we find it immediately in the context of the project. The handcraft is available in the region. The result is good for the project to experience, and then also there's work for the people around the projects. Something that I can share with you as an anecdote. Recently, we had someone, especially with the hotel, that was a local came into the hotel and said, you know what? I was very critical to know the project, she said, but congratulations. I really like it because I have a weird feeling that I know this, but I've never seen it before. So the meaning behind I know this, so I feel familiar to it, but at the same time, I have never seen it in this way, was really a compliment for us. Just to add to your whole point. I don't know if that clears up a little bit like the point.
And talking about scale, like it's really interesting how to really trying to understand and read the context in case of El Perdido, in case of the chapel as well in Tequila Factory, the agave chapel, like the materials are there and they are in different ways, like very tangible. You can even find, for example, some doors that are still as well from made of these kind of vara de arco roots and all these, but in a way they are very brutal and very intuitive. It's a very intuitive way of putting it from the locals. So all these different things really for us are like really, really special because it's where you put all the different works or even the different adaptations that local people have been doing in the area or even been working as handcraft over there. And in a way, we are just like a mediators where we really put the things that they already usually use or they are being used for years in case of the haciendas, the adobe brick and all these. And we try just to make a reinterpretation or a relecture of how we can use them in a contemporary way or use them in a specific function for this specific project in this case. So this is how it's really beautiful how local people really, when they see some of these projects, in a way, it makes sense. They see them or they get into it and leave them and they say, it seems it's familiar for us, or they have a good welcome, you know. It's not this thing that comes from the outside and arrives and people don't even understand it. So we think that materiality and different scales, it can be materiality, can be function, or other things that usually local peoples use. If we kind of read them, that the result is to really reach and try to interpret them and learn from them, because we really learned a lot from the locals.
And I think something interesting about this is that it's a beautiful idea to think how through architecture we, as people in different contexts, independently if the same country or not, we can have a common language. So it's interesting, but sometimes maybe we can have more in common with you in Taiwan, even though it's farther, because we live in a much more, let's say, modern global world, that in a person that sometimes an actual project in Mexico, we work in a rural country that lives to a completely different rhythm. So through these materials, we can talk in a much more common language. And I guess also we try to learn from the people that actually know about a specific region, really, yeah.
I wonder if there's any questions from the online participants.
Hi, nice to meet you, Luis and Armida. I think each of your project is really impressive, and I am quite interested in your second project, Villa One. And I would like to ask that Armida mentioned that there are voids between two volumes, and I think that is really beautiful. So I would like to ask, how do you define the private, semi-private, private, and public space in those villages when you try to mix the interior space and landscape together? Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Well, this void, as I mentioned, it helps to really provoke this current wind and as well to merge with the landscape. So what we did, as you see before the plan, you see one space that is much more for common area, which is the kitchen and the living room. And then the other volume is the bedroom and the bathroom. But at the same time, both volumes have a terrace, like it has a terrace that is blended with both of the volumes. And this terrace merge a little bit both areas. And not only the terrace, but how we oriented the villas in one side. For example, the kitchen and the living room is very close to the pool, so it's the common area. With that we reinforce that it's public area or common area. You have less privacy there if you really want. Obviously, if you want, you can just close the doors and that's it. And then from the side of where is the room, you don't have these public areas, the pool and the deck and the paths. In the back part where you have the room, you only have a private garden where through the landscape and through the design of the pathways, we realized how you can avoid going on those gardens. So without having walls, private walls to surround your privacy, they have this privacy. So it's just through having the program redesigned, the paths and the plants, you provoke this private area. And since the path doesn't go all the way to the gardens, private gardens, people don't go there. So in a way, we wanted to not through matter or through really solid things, understand people where to get in and where to go out. It's just only in a very intuitive way, people can just move around and they will just move where there is a public, and the ones that are in a more private way, they will just move around there. I don't know if
yes, it's like working between the architecture and an architectural plan. And as we said when we were explaining that project, I mean, it's a big piece of land relatively, but it's really not according to the density of the program. So we had to work between the architecture, the plan, the orientation, the voids, but also the layers of the walls and of the landscape in 2 and 3 dimensions, topography and the different layers that we see of vegetation, topography, rocks, and so on. So we can manipulate in a positive way the whole experience to really give the privacy and experience needed for the project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
I'm very enjoy every projects that you come up with natural material, but also present with a very modern style. And however, I'm curious about whether you once consulting the local constructor that is dedicated the traditional constructing techniques about every project that you use natural materials. For example, it's a wood structure that is learn from some traditional engineering. Is there any projects about that?
You mean through, sorry, because the volume is a little bit low, so we struggle a little bit to hear, but
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, each project looks quite modern. However, is there any constructing techniques learned from local traditional constructor?
yeah, yes. As we said, like it's through observation because we, of course, we pretty much, let's say we have the role of the architects and we try to do the strategy of putting, let's say, the ingredients in the table, but in a conceptual way, of course, in an architectural sense. And we do it by visiting the region, the context of each project before we start designing generally, to understanding the most we can about the surroundings of the project. And once we get to know, let's say, the materials and what labor and handcraft is available, then we find the local workers for that who actually know how to work with them. So it pretty much becomes a collaboration. Pretty much we bring the strategy and the, let's say, as you said, the more contemporary input of understanding what's around there already with the materials and the context and so on. But this collaboration is about including and putting, let's say, these actual specialists of working the materials and the local techniques on board. And most of the time, initially they're like, you can see like maybe some interesting expressions on their face of what are these people talking about, but immediately they become engaged because it's like everyone, they're also interested in using their knowledge and their way of working in a novel way, or at least in a novel program of a project that they usually don't use their work for. So it becomes like a challenge, and that brings a lot of synergy into the project to make things happen.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well,
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, yeah. I'm just curious about is there any limitation in using those natural material? Because in Taiwan, I think it's a lot of limitation to use this kind of material. Or is it easy to get those material in your country? I'm just a little curious about this. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. That's what we usually try to do in each project, like to really try to use the materials that are available around. For example, in the case of the tequila chapel, the one that was with adobe brick and pink stone and the terracotta tiles, we had like 4 months to complete the project or less. So we thought about with many strategies, but one of them was to really use local materials that in a way can be easy to bring them together. So for example, the bricks, the adobe bricks were 20 minutes or 15 minutes driving from the place where they used to produce these bricks, these adobe bricks, and actually they came with this bagazo, which is the product from the agave, where they merge the brick inside, and it's even part of this process. So it's really in the region, or even the terracotta, the pink terracotta was 45 minutes from the place, from a town, a really nice town where they really called Degollado, where they had a lot of handcraft of these local stone, or even the terracotta tile as well. It was from Guadalajara, which is 1.5 hours driving, and they produced there as well the tile. So in a way, if we really used local materials, we are efficient in time. If we, as well, locals know how to use the material and even how to construct them, you know? Like, usually we try to work with local people. So in the case, this constructor was local from Marandas, and we just traveled driving by car 1.5 hours from our city to this place where it was the chapel, and all of them were local. So all of them were very familiar with the construction techniques, in case of the brick, in case of the tile, in case of the terracotta. So that makes it really, in a way, efficient, more ecologically as well, because it's not the same to just bring a material that is, you know, like the other side of the world or in the other country, or transporting it from far. So it's nice because it really has a lot of positive things using what we have available. So we definitely, answering your question, we try to use what is available. So we have been very lucky to have these projects where we really go there, and sometimes people say there's nothing, but if you really go there to really understand how people live, really rural areas around, there's always culture, like, and history, always there. It's always there. Actually, when we were there in Taiwan 1 year ago, well, almost 1.5 years ago, Victor gave us a beautiful trip around your country, and we were impressed how you really have as well a lot of culture, a lot of history, a lot of really local techniques that are really from your culture. But sometimes we don't see them, or sometimes we just pass them away and we really don't observe. So I think it's a really nice exercise to use what we have around.
Something that Armida and I have always practiced, we try not to normalize our context, just to always become like tourist in your own world, and that allows you to see things in a different way. So in our work, we try to find a different arrangement for the same thing, or expressing the same thing in a different way. So just like making a difference with almost nothing. And I guess that in architecture, that has a lot of potential to create a new expression, because you know that architecture doesn't come from nothing. So it's always like a consequence or an evolution of something else. And even though when you think you're doing something new, you find that it already existed in a way or another. So we're just pretty much just putting things in a slight different way of what we have around us.
Even just like as something that it was just as a exercise where we were there in the trip as an example, and we really got in love of the construction techniques of your religious spaces, for example. They are really beautiful. They have really nice connections, material, the wood, how the stone is used. And for us that we come from the outside, we were really impressed on how you had all these techniques that for us were very, very, very different. So probably as well, you see our things very different, but in a way, people that is local, it's very normal for them to see all these techniques or materials. So I think it's really nice just to see culture, history, and what it is around.
Hi, Amita and Luis.
Hi.
I want to ask, could you please elaborate more on how you integrate the material red earthwork and wood to your case El Perdido? And the second question is there something unexpected occur when you combine the two material, terracotta tiles and unbacked tiles? This is my question.
So just to understand a little bit better, how do we incorporate, you said, the rammed walls in the structure? Or can you elaborate a little bit on the question?
The second question or the first question?
The second question.
The second question. The second question is there something unexpected occur when you combine the two material, terracotta tiles and the unbacked tiles?
Terracotta tile and the brick tile.
In the project of Terracotta Chapel at Tequila Factory.
But we, yeah, like if we put them together, we don't understand. Like if there's, like if we put together the terracotta file and the brick tile and the you say what happens if we put them together? Or
She asked that is there anything that unexpected happened?
Okay, unexpected. Well, something unexpected was that doing the chapel with this, you know, finding the new function and the new shape and all these things, something that was a little bit unexpected is like the bricks, the terracotta bricks, like the bricks, the earth bricks, adobe bricks, usually work with specific tall walls. So in the case of the chapel, that we wanted to have a really tall volume, really tall, like not too tall, but it was kind of 10 meters. That this brick, you know, adobe brick, it was really a little bit of in English, how we can say it, like, we had to really resolve how we are gonna resolve and construct this wall that it was, imagine, 10 meters tall. So we had to have an engineer and working with him to have this structure to make it this large span that we have, that you can see that there's no columns around, that it's almost 10 meters as well. So all these different things is a lot of, you have kind of some things that at the beginning you don't know how you're gonna solve them, but and because you are using these materials that probably are not put in these situations, but then when you work with different disciplines, is where you really find the solutions. Like it really doesn't matter if we don't know, someone always will know how to help you and work together. So in this case, we worked with a civil engineer that helped us to put together this engineering part of this way in this case.
Yes, and in the case of the rammed earth walls, again, it's similar. At the end, I guess we, through practice, have developed a system, a semi-system of how to work with people, open up the conversation, and working much more farther than just inside the office with our computer. Our work is a lot because our local context about having conversations, putting some conversations and cards on the table, and always having a feedback. That's why we said it's always like a collaboration from our actual collaborators in the studio, but also from the clients that have a big input. So in the case as, for example, with the terracotta and the brick, of course, as we said, it's things that are there. We just bring it a step forward. And of course, there's complexities, structural, tectonically, and all of that. But in conversation with the builder, the people who actually know about the actual material and are part of trying to put this forward, there's generally an answer to the questions.
Can you listen to her?
And the same thing with the rammed earth walls. I mean, I guess it's just like learning how to bring the best of all the team to the table. There's always the complexities, but there's always a word of collaborating and solving things out. The first question was about the rounded walls, and the second about the other project with the materials. I guess there are different materials and different complexities, but at the end, the way to solve them is again through the conversations with a team and always trying to find the most competent person to bring into the project according to its complexities.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I guess because of time, like we actually have a very good Q&A session. It seems like the question might keep going on. But I think the best way is that eventually we want to probably invite you when the situation getting better. I think it's the best way to invite you to having a workshop.
It will be
Yes.
a pleasure.
Definitely.
We will
And
be
we
happy,
can
very
go
happy.
to somewhere rural, vernacular workshop,
Yeah.
making all these crazy bricks using
Yeah.
dirt with all these things together,
Definitely.
and collaborate with some local, like there are some people in Taiwan, they're also working on these kind of projects. Maybe we can have something that can do things together.
Wow, that
We would love to
amazing.
to
Okay,
do that. Thank
so
you very much.
good. So I have your words. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And also, I don't know if Victor's still here.
Yeah, I'm here.
Cool. So Victor, you hear us, right?
Yeah, of
So
course.
let's arrange a workshop for this lovely couple, and maybe in the next year we're going to have the third member coming in, right?
Yes.
Cool.
Here is that.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ho. Thank you, guys.
Yes.
Nice to see you all again. And we'll stay in touch, and definitely we'll come up with something interesting that we can have a fantastic conversation. We're looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
And we
Okay,
are always
thank you.
happy to always be in conversation with you and with Victor. We are really thankful, really.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you for
Thank you so much. Thank you. So everyone have a clap, and thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
it's 11, I guess it's 11:20 p.m.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.
Okay.
Night.
Okay.
Bye.
Ciao. See you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.